This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Welcome to Inside the Jungle, your official show for Auburn men's basketball. I am your host, Chandler Fullman, and I am joined alongside my co-host, Jase Phillips. How's it going today, Jase?
I'm doing pretty well, Chandler. How about yourself?
Well, we are recording this Friday night after Auburn just got a big win over South Florida, which we will talk about here in a few minutes. So I'm doing pretty well. But we have three games to address on this episode. First, our exhibition game versus Alabama Huntsville, wasn't it?
That's right.
And then our first regular season game versus
George Mason.
And then tonight versus South Florida. So, Jase, just initial thoughts on the first three opponents. Who do you think was the best opponent out of the three?
I definitely think that South Florida was the best opponent. They did a lot of the little things right. They played really hard, and I think obviously, based not only on the score, but they definitely gave us the biggest run for our money out of the three opponents. They were a very physical team. They weren't scared, and they didn't back down from a bigger opponent.
Yeah, South Florida gave us a tough go of things tonight. And if you remember, last year down in Tampa, we went down to Tampa and played at South Florida, and that game was a tough game as well. And the strange thing is, South Florida only won 8 games last year. But both times in Tampa and here at home in Auburn, South Florida came ready to play against Auburn. I don't know what it is.
They did. But
last year's game, Auburn won 58-52. But they were down at halftime, just like we were tonight. And I think it was a similar score tonight. They were down at halftime last year, 33-26. And then Auburn outscored them in the second half, 32-19.
Yep.
But both games were fairly close. Here's something that was different about the two games as I'm looking at the stat line. Last year, K.D. Johnson was the leading scorer with 15 points. What happened tonight?
I don't think he had a point. He didn't have a rebound, and he had 4 fouls. KD, he could just never really get going. He did have a couple of steals, and he had an opportunity to have an easy finish at the other end to really give us a spark and for him to get going, and he just couldn't even cash on those easy opportunities. So it was just a very tough night for KD, and obviously we're hoping that we see less and less of those because KD is a player that we need to be more consistent as the season goes on if we're going to be a team to compete on into the SEC play.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And then just of note, the second leading scorer last year was Zep Jasper. You know how many points he had tonight?
Not many. Zero.
So the two leading scorers last year had 0 points, and we still found a way to pull it out. But let's go ahead and get started with University of Alabama Huntsville in the exhibition. First game of first technical game of the year, but it did not count towards the record. Exhibition game, which Auburn won 87-69. Initial thoughts on that game, Jase?
We had a slow start to that game. We came out and played a lot better as the game went on, but we didn't just pull away early like I thought we might. But as the game went on and we started playing together a little more, things got better. We didn't shoot very well from the 3-point line, and that's kind of carried into these last two games as well. And the other team did shoot well. Alabama Huntsville, they came in this game. They had a few guys that got hot from three that we really had to defend, and so. I did expect us to pull away, but we did struggle there towards the beginning. But one guy that really stood out to me in that exhibition was Trey Donaldson. Trey's a guy that came in as a freshman this year, and we really didn't know a bunch about him other than what we've seen in these preseason scrimmages. And one thing I love about Trey is that he does not play like a freshman. Is he the highest person on the stat line or most points? No, he's not. But he does the little things right. He runs the offense. He doesn't really make mistakes with the ball, and he's a leader on the court. He's a vocal leader, and that's just something you don't see out of many freshmen.
Yeah. Also of note about Trey Donaldson is, I believe, looking at this, he was the leading rebounder with 7 rebounds for the Tigers on the exhibition night.
Yep.
Also stand out on the stat line is Jalen Williams, 6 for 6 from the field and 3 for 3 from the free throw line, for a total of 16 points and 4 rebounds.
Yep. Jalen, we did a really good job getting him the ball in the middle, and that turnaround little short jumper, if he can hit that consistently, he's going to be a very, very hard player to defend for other teams that we'll face this season.
And another few notes about the exhibition game: Wendell Green Jr. with 12 points and Alan Flanagan with 11 points. Through the first 3 games, what are your thoughts on Alan Flanagan? I feel like he's definitely gotten back to what we saw. What was it? Not last year, but 2 years ago.
Yep.
More so in these first 3 games.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think Flanagan, I feel like he's on his revenge tour. He feels like he's finally starting to get his game back and really develop into that player we all thought that he could develop into. He's a leader on the court. He's a hard-nosed defender, and he's a very good finisher. And if he can keep shooting that 3 ball the way that he shot it some of these first 3 games, then I think he could be a huge player for us down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree. But it was a I'm not going to say a great win for Auburn, because I don't feel like the opponent was quite up to what we're going to see the rest of the year. But a solid win, and I thought it was a very good job of putting up 87 points for the first time they have played against somebody other than themselves in a long time. I thought putting up 87 points was good and showed the potential that this team has. Though through these first 2 regular season games, the offense and the shooting has struggled.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and move on to the first regular season game versus George Mason. Tell us just initial thoughts about that game.
Yeah, initial thoughts about George Mason. Same thing that we kind of just touched on. Offense has not been the strongest to start the year, but against George Mason, and even tonight, but especially against George Mason, our defense really, really played well, and we really scored a lot of points off of our defense. I mean, we caused 19 turnovers against George Mason, and I believe we got several points off of those turnovers as well. So even though our offense was not the best, we did cause lots of turnovers.
Yeah. Something that just unfortunately pops out to me on this stat line is 3-point shooting. In the first half, we went 2 of 17, and in the second half, we went 2 of 8.
Yeah.
That's for a total of 4 for 25.
I believe that's 16%.
And that is 16%. And I'm afraid that come SEC play, 16% is not going to cut it.
Nope.
If we want to win ball games. Thankfully, from what I have seen, we just have more talent in these first 2 games. I mean, that's what it's come down to.
Yeah. When we're bigger and stronger, because one stat I want to touch on is 48 rebounds, 22 of those coming on the offensive end. When you get those offensive rebounds and you get those second chance points, it's the little things like that that's the difference in games, especially when we get to play better opponents down the road.
Yeah, and it was, rebounding-wise, Dylan Cardwell stands out, had 9 rebounds. quite a physical presence down in the paint. And I really think Cardwell has taken a major jump from last season to this season.
He has.
I have seen a major jump from him, and you guess what other player?
Chris Moore.
Chris Moore. That's exactly who I was going to say.
I believe through these first 2 games, Chris Moore has been an unsung hero for this team. He's done lots of little things right. He rebounds the basketball. He plays hard on defense. He's scoring some points, and he's playing physical. And, he's doing all of these things great, and he's not getting a lot of recognition. I feel like he's really been an unsung hero for us so far, and I think that, Chris Moore is one of those guys that, you don't necessarily plan for when you're playing Auburn, but he's a guy that if he can consistently play well, that could really help us down the stretch. He's just such a great team player.
Yeah, Chris Moore against George Mason, quietly, I should say, had 8 points. The leading scorer was Wendell with 16, and then following him, Janai and KD Johnson both had 12. Janai and KD, I don't know what it is really, but they both kind of struggled shooting, which kind of seemed to be a trend for the whole entire team these first 2 games. And I'm really hoping and I'm thinking that when Chance Westry gets back, that may help the stat line a little bit shooting wise.
I agree. He's somebody that definitely stood out this summer in Israel when the team traveled over there and played a few games. He was somebody that was consistent in all 3 of those games, and he really just kind of made everybody around him better.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I would not be surprised at all if when Chance comes back, if he becomes our best player. And I also will not be surprised if he's not quite the best player, because I think Wendell Green is a very talented player. I think Janai Broome, when he plays like he can play, I think he has potential. I think Yohan Traore has potential.
Definitely.
KD Johnson, Jalen Williams. That's the thing about this team is there's not one like Jabari Smith or Walker Kessler that can rack up 20, 25 points each night. There's probably 8 or 9 guys that could be your leading scorer any given night.
Yep. And I think a lot of the times when you face teams like that, they're harder to defend when you can't just shut down one player. And so I think that'll really help us, if we can get to playing together well as a team down the stretch, that'll really help us to click. One thing I do want to touch on is free throws. That has been a big struggle here at the beginning of the year, and thankfully the 2 teams we've played have not really shot the ball from the free throw line very well either. But that's no excuse for the way we're shooting from the free throw line. We have got to shoot free throws better if we want to be a contender for the SEC.
Yeah, what was the percentage wise?
I believe we were 62% against George Mason, and while that's not awful, you can't shoot 62% and win in the SEC night in and night out.
And I think that's a nice transition into moving into the second game of the year, which was tonight versus South Florida. Guess what our free throw percentage ended up being tonight?
I'm going to guess lower than 62.
Nope. It was exactly 62%.
Wow.
62.5%, 20 of 32 from the free throw line. But most of the night we were trending around 50%. I think a lot of free throws towards the end of the game in garbage time helped boost our free throw statistic. But most of the night we were right around 50%. And, I mean, even at 62%, like you said, that's not going to cut it come SEC play.
Nope. And also tonight, the turnovers against South Florida. I believe we had more turnovers than they did. Yep, we had 20 turnovers to their 17. And while it was good that we, forced 17 turnovers, we cannot turn the ball over 20 times and beat a quality opponent. We also didn't shoot the 3-ball well again tonight. I believe about 20%, 5 of 25.
Yeah, well, that's improvement from first game, 4 of 25. So,
wow.
hopefully we keep trending in the right direction. Well, I don't think it can get worse. So, there's only one way from here up.
That's right. But one player I really, really want to give a lot of recognition to, or really two players, Wendell Green and Alan Flanagan. Wendell Green really stepped up tonight, 9 of 11 from the line. And, when we needed somebody to just take over, he took that ball and he drove it. And he, it was almost like nobody was going to stop him tonight when it was time for us to really need a basket. He was going to go to the goal and he was going to get that shot up and it was going to fall. And so I really just want to give a lot of recognition to Wendell and also Alan Flanagan. I mean, he had a solid night, 18 points, 3 for 6 from the 3-point line. I mean, when Alan Flanagan can shoot that three, he's going to be able to get to the goal with the way he can slash. So if he can add that 3-point shot to his arsenal consistently, I think that's really going to help us down the stretch.
Yeah. Alan Flanagan going 50% from the 3-point line, 3 of 6. And I'm telling you, if we can have Flanagan return to his self that from 2 years ago, I guess that was his freshman or sophomore season.
Yeah.
If he can return back to that self, this team is going to be hard to beat because we will have Wendell at the point that could be the leading scorer. We will have Flanagan at small forward. We've got Trayor and Broom inside, and not to mention Jalen Williams, Chris Moore,
Dylan Cardwell,
Zep Jasper. I mean, this team is deep.
Yeah. And what about Dylan Cardwell tonight? I mean, I feel like when Neville Arena was just dead, and also shout out to everybody who showed up tonight. It was a great crowd for a Friday night basketball game in Neville Arena. But it was just hard for the fans to get into it, especially there in the first half. And I feel like coming out in the second half, defensively especially, Dylan Cardwell really gave us a boost and a spark to get the fans back into the game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. At one point, after I think it was a Dylan Cardwell block, I want to say, I thought he was about to, I don't know what he was going to do. I mean, he stomped over in front of the crowd and started slamming his chest. Yeah. And I was like, what is he about to do? But that's just Dylan for
you. And he even started cramping up. And I really don't even know if he was cramping up from playing or from his celebration. But he definitely always brings the energy. And the crowd just feeds off of that. And then all the other players feed off the crowd. So, we can always count on Dylan to bring a lot of excitement and passion with the way he plays.
Yeah, definitely so. An interesting statistic tonight that also I recognize that I mentioned earlier in the episode, KD Johnson and Zep Jasper combined for 0 points. Together they were 0 of 8 from the floor. From the free throw line, they were 0 of 5. And that's not going to cut it come SEC play, because the key in SEC play is you got to have good guards. I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, that's what killed us, ended up killing us last year in the NCAA tournament, was the fact that, we had Jabari Smith. We had a great power forward. We had Walker Kessler, a great center. But guard play is what dominates March. The guards are what will carry you come March.
Yep.
And we did not have that guard play last year, and so I'm really hoping that KD and Zep step up like Wendell has, and can continue to excel as the season goes on.
Yep. And I think Zep right now, I think he's just a little frustrated on the offensive end, but you can't let his defensive presence go unnoticed. Zep, he is always going to defend the basketball. If he misses a shot on the offensive end, if he's not having a very good night offensively, that he's still going to be playing defensively. I love that he does not let his offensive performance affect the way he defends. And I really think that that's what was able to keep us in the game tonight when we were not playing well offensively.
Yeah, definitely so. But at the end of the day, you know what matters is the fact that we pulled away with the W. And come late February, early March, you know what that committee is going to look at? They're going to look at whether it was a W or an L.
That's right.
Nobody is really going to remember this game that happened 3 or 4 months ago come March.
Nope.
So the good thing is we came away with a win.
That's right. And shout out to Coach Jay and the Auburn women's basketball team, also on a 2-0 start. Coming off wins against Sam Houston and South Alabama. So, you know, the women have overcome a lot of adversity early this season too, dealing with 4 people out of the second game and still finding a way to win. So shout out to Coach Jay and what she's doing to turn this women's basketball program around.
Yeah, definitely. Me and Jase, we went to the, first game of the year?
Yep, Sam Houston State.
Versus Sam Houston State. And I was very impressed with just the talent that Coach Jay has brought in compared to years past. Of course, we've got some returning talent as well with, what is it?
Aisha Coulibaly and Honesty Scott Grayson and Sanaya Wells.
But some of these newcomers, they can ball too.
They can.
So very impressive. I was very impressed, I should say, from the women's basketball team, and I look forward to seeing how they grow throughout the remainder of the season. But going back to men's, next week we will face a little better opponent in Winthrop. The Winthrop Eagles?
Yep.
On, I believe, Tuesday night. And then Friday night, we face, I think, a Texas Southern team that should be a decent opponent as well. I think Texas Southern, if I'm not correct, they made the tournament last year, or it was either last year or 2 years ago. So, and then Winthrop, that's a name that you commonly hear during March as well.
Yep.
So both teams, I think, even though not Power 5 schools, could bring Auburn a good test into Auburn Arena.
And I believe that Winthrop I believe they got some a veteran squad. I know that Kelton Talford, their leading scorer, he's an upperclassman as well as their leader in assist. I believe it's Corey Hightower.
Yeah.
He's a senior. So I believe, it's always tough when you go against these mid-major schools already, but especially when they're a veteran squad.
Yeah. Hightower averages 15 a game. The Talford, he averages 20 a game. And then
9 rebounds too.
Yeah, one other player, Tony Ari, I think is his first name, but he averages 14 a game. So they've got 3 guys that can be the leading scorer any given night. So they spread the wealth around pretty well. Also, so I think that'll be a fun game. What is it? A 7:00 tip?
I believe so. 6:00.
6:00 tip on Tuesday night, and I believe it's on TV for the first time.
Yep, SEC Network.
SEC Network. So I encourage everybody to tune in and listen to that, watch that game on SEC Network. And then Friday night, we will play Texas Southern, and that should be a pretty good matchup as well. Texas Southern, like I said, made the tournament last year, I believe. But both teams next week should be a fun matchup.
Definitely.
Are you planning on being in attendance for both games?
I am. I'm planning on being in attendance in both. And also, the women have a big matchup, ACC matchup next week, hosting Georgia Tech.
Yeah, Georgia Tech. And I believe, if I'm not correct, Coach Jay beat Georgia Tech last year.
She did. That ranked Georgia Tech.
Yeah, so I was was quite impressed by, and I don't know why I remember that game, but I think that was like Coach Jay's first big win.
Yes.
So I think that got the ball rolling, and then she also beat Tennessee.
Yep. Top 5 Tennessee,
and she had a few other very quality wins. So I'm very impressed by what Coach Jay is doing, and I can't wait to see what she does next week versus Georgia Tech in Auburn Arena. But I think that'll about do it for this time on Inside the Jungle, unless you have any final thoughts.
No, I think that's about it. 2-0 start for men and women. You can't beat that.
2-0. And the men have 2 games next week, like we said.
And the women do as well.
The women have 2 games as well. So you will be hearing from us again. Expect to hear from us again probably in about 2 weeks. That will do it for this time on Inside the Jungle. Once again, I'm your host, Chandler, joined by my friend and co-host, Jase. That'll do it, and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.